In the world today, if you have a business or if you have a website or if you don't have a website or if you don't have social media, you're actually hurting your business. So it's really important that you make sure that you have those. Not only that, you should also have a strategy in place where it interconnect all your internet presence together and it leads them to the submission page, at which point a model for your funnel design kicks in. So what this means is, for example, if you go to someone's website and let's say that they ask you for your email. So you probably have seen websites like those where they will say, for example, give us to your email and subscribe to our newsletter. So that's typically the what I like to think of the conventional way of collecting data. But the thing is, a lot of the times when these emails are collected, as soon as they're submitted for those newsletters, they're usually just added to a list of email services like Mailchimp as an example. And the thing is, Mailchimp is very difficult to connect it and to make strategies out of the data. So it's a long story, but what I'm saying here is that the data that is collected is put on something known as a CRM. So look that up if you don't know what that is. An example is Podio, so podio.com, or Lion Desk would be another example. So the whole idea here is that when people submit information that you ask them, it should be going to the CRM instead of going to like a list. The reason why it goes through a CRM is because a CRM is like a database. So the way you can think of a database is that if you have a book and the book has an outline, so each chapter on the book represents a table on the book itself. So a table just basically means chapter one. So the whole idea here is that as chapter one starts, it might be broken down by key points on the chapter itself. So that's kind of how microdata is. It comes down to collecting specific information. So, for example, a phone number. If they give you their phone number, think about how you can use that. You can use strategies of text messages. You can use strategies of calling them, and the sequences of how often and the combinations is really up to you. So what this video is all about is giving you some ideas of how you can strategize any data that you collect. So remember, collecting data is the future. If your business is just kind of sitting there statically to where it's just providing information and not really interacting with your users, you're actually losing out on a lot of potential business for the simple fact that you don't know whether if they would have provided you with the opportunity to where you could have followed up with them. And the follow-up sequences ultimately depends on the model of funnel that you create. So I actually made a couple of videos about that topic already.
Alright
So
guys,
check
so on
those
this
out.
video I will be talking about how you can strategize your data. So actually made this to remind myself how to strategize your collected data on your website for profits. So first of all, why for profits? Because it will allow you the ability to strategize your data, and that in itself allows you the ability to constantly make offers to your customers or your users or to give them value. So why is that important? You'll see in a second. So my friend here, Vincent, he said it really well. Well, specifically, he was talking about real estate investing. But he says that it requires connecting dots. Data is a potential prospect, a possible deal, and a potential profit. It all comes down to understanding the mechanics of how to work with big data. What we do here is intended to simplify the complexities so you can focus only on executing the business model to profits. From the process, we've created scripts and databases intended to allow anyone with no computer knowledge to make money if they learn the foundations of knowledge. We test new ideas and only use what works. So why is that relevant? So that is relevant because it relates to this video that I'm making right now, for the simple fact that at the beginning, the introductory video, I mentioned how specific microdata can be very handy for the fact that you could strategize that data. So let me actually show you what I mean. So that's my friend. Thank you, my friend Vincent. Let me resize this actually. Alrighty, put myself there in that corner. So segmentation of microdata fields. So what does this mean? So I'm going to use my website, Optimistic Deals. So, normally if you visit someone's website, there will be a landing page or a squeeze page or a pop-up page or whatever you want to call it. So pop-up page, landing page, squeeze page, there's different types. So more than anything, what matters is that the way in which they attempt to request that information from you is really important. So why is that important? It's because the data that a user provides to you allows you the possibility of strategizing that data to where you could actually provide more value to your users, and also to provide possibly the opportunity for you as the person who's creating the content to potentially sell it to your users. So in segmentation of microdata fields, which basically means if, for example, going on my website and I'm asking you for your email, that means that I'm asking only a limited amount of information to mine. So if you gave me your email, I only have your email. Versus the segmentation of microdata, which basically means just collecting more information. So it comes down to the fact that the limited info model is usually like this. You go on someone's website through either social media or whatever funnel led them there. They land on your website. You have the landing page, pop-up page. You request them their email, and everything else happens from there. So you have that strategy, which I consider the traditional sales funnel. I have a very good video about that, so check that out if you haven't. So just look through my videos. And you have the profile method, which I also emphasize on my other video, the case study. So check that video out if you haven't. So that's the main difference between either or between the two, is that on one of them you're collecting very limited information, which means that it limits you how you can strategize that information to potentially outreach to your users. So what to collect, info that can be strategized, building campaigns out of each microdata fields. So let me actually go into more details. So more than anything, with your data, you want to create data culture. So you want to let the numbers decide your decisions. So for example, if you have a campaign where you have one product, but it's very generalized, in the future of marketing, especially online, target marketing can be subcategorized depending upon the information that you have available to strategize. So here I will show you some examples of what I mean. So for example, let's say that in a situation where you decided to implement the profile method, which, as I said, check out my other video, the case study video. If you implemented that, where your users, instead of just outright having a pop-up message, the landing page asking for their email, what happens instead is that they go through a process where they create a profile. So more than anything, the individual fields that are requested, so for example, if you go on my website and ask for your email, that would be the field of email, so individually. So what I mean is that if you ask for further information by building a profile process, it will give you the opportunity to get other kind of information which you could potentially strategize. So for example, if you get someone's full name, it's kind of challenging to strategize. So if you think about, for example, let's say you had a list of 100 people and there was variation of names, and I were to ask you, how can you strategize that list to potentially uh, craft a specific campaign to where you think you could find a niche out of that. But it's very difficult with a full name. So the only thing I could think of would be like ethnicity-based campaigns or a specific product that you might have. So that's just an idea of kind of what I thought of. Of course, if you have their email, you can do email marketing strategies. And I also made a video about that. The 2018 email marketing strategies. So check that out if you haven't. But it ultimately comes down to having compelling copyright. So your message should be really compelling for the people who are receiving your emails. And these emails are usually built. So you have built a list of emails, and how you build the list, it's you have to put in the time by creating content online, which will lead them. So, for example, from a Facebook page to your website, and once they're on your website, they will give you this information. So that's kind of what I mean by a funnel. It's a process. So they can give you all these possible combinations. So a phone number, you can call them, you can text them, you can send pictures, and the frequency and the combinations of how you can intertwine just this information alone is ultimately up to you. So it depends on the industry. For example, I've seen sequences, like for example, in real estate, they will say uh, day one, then day three, day five, then 10, day 10, day 30. So those are like the sequences of when you're supposed to follow up with people. And each individual one of those sequences that you follow up with the users has to have a purpose. So that's part of how you have to think of your strategies of how am I going to use this information that I'm collecting. So for example, here you'll see a profile link. If you're asking your users for their for like their LinkedIn information, what that means is that you have a specific audience type. So if you think about the kind of people that are on LinkedIn versus the people who are not, so the person who might give you their email to LinkedIn, it means that they perhaps have a different perception of what online business is all about. So more than anything, it's to potentially craft an opportunity. So for example, if you build a LinkedIn page, you can add them through there. So it's all about trying to make connections to allow your business to prosper by allowing by using all the data that you have available. So if someone provides you with their address, you can do direct mail, or you could actually go in person. So you could pay somebody to go there in person and leave those things that they leave on your door. I forget what they're called. I think they're like door hangers or something like that. So you could do that, which could be cheaper actually. So for example, think about it like this: if you, like me, for example, I live in Texas, so let's say that I wanted to do some direct mail, I don't know, in Ohio. Um, would it be cheaper for me to pay for the service, direct mail, or would it be cheaper to get it done locally and then have someone kind of do it? The reason being is that if somebody goes in person, it increases the likeliness of awareness of your product versus just relying on the direct mail alone. Could be potentially very ineffective. So think about it like that. If you have age, so let's say if you have um, a list of 1,000 people that have registered to your website, and you break down age ranges, for example, people in their 20s and their 30s to whatever range you want, and you can do specific target marketing for those specific people based on the age. So it's more than anything to offer up on anything that relates to that specific age group. So that's why I think that it's important that you know this. So annual revenue could be used to determine, like for example, socioeconomic uh, standards of that specific person. So for example, if they are, I don't know, if they make over $200,000 as an example, you know that they are a specific type, they have a specific type of lifestyle, meaning that you can craft your campaign a little bit more differently. So it's just kind of ideas that you have to think about as you are developing strategies of how you can use it. All right, so you also have to be careful about the way way that you request for the data. So for example, let's say that if you have a landing page and you're asking for just name, people might just give you like their nickname or their first name, or might not even give you their complete name. Versus if you request first and last name as individual fields, um, then they are more likely to give you the complete information that you need. So let me talk about this email opted in to landing page. So the traditional way, as I mentioned, they land on the landing page. There's the email. Let's say they opt in to give you their email, and then the email strategies kick in. So what does that mean? It means that if someone gives you their email, you need to have a strategy in place so sequences can happen. So for example, let's say I go on your website and I put my email. From day one, there are specific emails that you should be sending me because I opted in to give you my email. And what follows after the broadcast of emails needs a specific purpose of why you're sending me that email. So don't forget to always provide value for your emails. And of course, the sequential emails should ultimately depend on the audience type. So for example, as I was saying, if you had an audience that you knew their socioeconomic standards, that means that their strategy could be a little bit different, and also price ranges. It allows you to determine that information based on this of what you potentially offer them specifically. So the phone number you can call, text, voicemail, text messages, combinations, and frequency is ultimately up to you how you want to mix it up. I would recommend that you do your research for your specific industry. So depending on whatever industry that you're in, that's how I would kind of strategize the frequency and the combinations of how I would want to use that information. So the profile link, as I mentioned already, it's a specific group. The address, you can do direct mail. It can be cheaper if you pay somebody to just go, talk to them face to face, door knocking maybe, local print. So local print, you could get a higher quality instead of, relying on uh, postcards, which could be lower quality. So you might be getting a bulk. So for example, $500 could get you 1,000 postcards. Versus if you get it done locally, $500 could get you many more that you can leave in someone's door. And the question is, does it come out to be about the same if you spend $300 on things that can be left on someone's door and you pay someone $200 to go drop it off or to go potentially talk to them for a minute or so? So think about that. So age, think about the best time to focus your campaigns for that specific audience. So for example, if you are on Facebook, let me show you. Alright, so if you're on Facebook, you can create specific content for demographic-based information. I have done videos about that as well, so check those out. Facebook relevance score, really important to know. But ultimately what I'm saying is that the age range, you can kind of break that group on Facebook to advertise specific campaigns. So that means that will be specific audience type marketing. And the variation of the message can differ. A specific age range group could be receiving a specific message crafted specifically just for them. The variation in combinations and frequency of how often you're doing this is ultimately up to you. So what I'm saying here is that all of these that I provided you so far, all seven, including annual revenue, the way that you strategize the information is ultimately up to you. It will require your creativity of how you can use the information. So variation in message and variation in combinations and frequency depends on the socioeconomic of the user. So that's kind of how I see it right now. But it could depend on so many different things for your user. Since I know the industry information is different for each industry. So annual revenue, if they're providing you with that information, what that means is that you can determine socioeconomic strategies based on what you think they could afford. So you could potentially craft a higher quality content specifically crafted just for that audience. So that's kind of how you could think about it. And don't forget, provide promotions and special offers during holidays. All right, so here is an example of just a quick example. Strategy depends on the data available. So for example, let's say that somebody opted in, they gave you their email. So what do you do now? So what data is available? So we're saying that the full name and the email are available. So how would you build a campaign out of that? So I decided to build an email campaign since that's the only data that can be really strategized. So for example, I could send a specific email on day one for a specific purpose, and the sequence and how often is ultimately up to you. So remember, have your content prepared. If people are opting in to your content, you need to have something free to give to them. And the way that you approach how to give them that free content, you can use the traditional way where they land on your landing page. You ask them to subscribe, and then you give them the email via ebook. So never give them the ebook on your website. Send it to them via email. Always important to do that. So, and test headlines. Try to test, 10 possible combinations on the headline of the email. So do after and before tests to see which headlines work the best. So you'll see here as an example, since we only have email, what this means is that the campaign can only be strategized with emails. So I just kind of drew 3 emails on day 1. Then I said 1 email on day 5, 2 emails on day 10. So frequency and combination depends on the audience type, or up to you, honestly. Up to you. But do your research depending on your strategy. Always try to find out the frequency. And depending on the information that you have available is ultimately what determines how limited you are to your strategy of how you can outreach to your audience or your users. So for example, here I said that if I included a phone number from the information that I collected, this is how I could potentially use my strategy. So for example, I said that on day 1, I would send 2 emails and then 1 text message. On day 10, 1 phone call and 1 email. Day 15, 1 voicemail, 1 email, 1 text. So I just made up those examples. I'm just trying to convey the possible combinations that you could think of and the strategies of how it can be implemented. Again, up to you. So frequency of when depends on the industry type. Confirmed motivation of user to be interested in having opted in means that they are more likely to follow up on purchasing one of your other products or one of your other services. So that's why it's important to collect information in order for you to use to either provide content, provide value using one of your campaign strategies to get people to visit, to check you out, and to want them to opt in to whatever it is that you have to offer for them. So never forget the benefits that you provide to your users. That's the way you should approach it. But these are micro data that you should be collecting and to attempt to strategize it. So I hope that this was useful to you, and remember to check out the videos that I mentioned and understand the difference between the traditional funnel method, which in itself is actually very revolutionary for a lot of online businesses, and the combination strategized way. So remember, if you have a business, you need to be collecting information and attempting to strategize information, because that's how you increase business. People checking you out are cold leads, and you want to have them become warm leads. Once they become warm leads, that's data that you have mined, and the sequences of how you outreach to your warm leads are the ones that are likely to increase the possibility of you increasing sales in your product or services. So I hope that makes a lot of sense. It's a long video, so thank you for sticking around if you did. So, all right, take care.